Hello everybody and welcome to today's onboarding webinar for T Level centres. It's aimed at teachers and assessors of the education and childcare T Level. If you haven't already done so, please pop something into the chat or question box to let us know you can hear us okay. You'll find this at the bottom of the webinar control panel at the right hand side of your screen. We do encourage questions, so please add them to the question box. We'd like to reassure you that no question is a silly question, and if we're not able to answer the questions today, we'll follow them up with our NCFE colleagues. Also, the session today is being recorded and it will be shared on our YouTube channel afterwards. So you'll see on the screen now what we're going to cover in this webinar. This session focuses on the education and childcare T Level, which we've been supporting for a year now. We'll therefore also share some of the lessons learned from providers who've been delivering the programme, and we'll be starting year 2 this September. Okay, so starting with introductions, my name is Helen Scanlon and I'll be leading today's session. I'm one of NCFE's Curriculum Development Officers and I'm responsible for supporting the teaching and learning of the education and childcare T Level. I'm joined today by some of my provider development colleagues, Rachel and David. Our role is to support T-Level centres through the planning, onboarding and CPD processes for NCFE and cash qualifications, and our purpose is to promote and advance learning. Rachel and David will be monitoring the question box for me today, and we'll answer the questions that we're able to as they come in. We'll then review any outstanding questions in the question and answer section near the end later. We're lucky to be joined by Janet King today. Janet's the Sector Manager for Education and Childcare, who will be able to answer any subject-specific questions. Hello, Janet, and thank you for joining us today.
Hello, Helen. Hello, everybody. Yeah, lovely to be here. Looking forward to the session. Thank you.
Okay, so a bit of background on NCFE and the provider development team. NCFE are a national awarding organisation and we're a registered educational charity. Our purpose is to promote and advance learning whilst helping to create a fairer and more inclusive society. We have a strong heritage in learning that goes back over 170 years. As for the provider development team, our purpose is to support providers to develop their capability to deliver world-class transformational learning experiences and the best possible outcomes for their learners. Each of us have come from an education and teaching background, working with a range of learners in a range of settings. We support with the pre-approval onboarding by running curriculum planning sessions and online workshops, the details of which are available on the website. On approval, we'll support teaching staff through the onboarding process with a range of webinars, information, advice and guidance at salient points in the journey. One particular area for support that Wave 1 centres have found extremely valuable have been the one-to-one consultations. These consultations are held at regular intervals and there are opportunities to discuss the challenges and issues centres are facing with the delivery of T levels and working collaboratively to identify effective approaches and solutions. In addition to the onboarding process, we also support centres with an ongoing programme of online CPD, looking at topical and relevant areas of interest. Indicatively, this might include initial assessment and induction, linear programme delivery, formative assessment strategies, developing English and maths, and the difficult to teach areas. In normal times, we'll be supporting you through a series of face-to-face CPD and training events. Obviously, these can't go ahead in the current climate, but we'll publish details of any future face-to-face events on our website. Okay, introductions done. We're going to start off with a poll, which you'll see on the screen now. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low and 10 being high, how would you rate your current confidence level in relation to the education and childcare T level? Consider the spec, the content, delivery model and assessment tasks. And I'm going to launch the poll now. If you could just choose the most appropriate number for your current starting level. So you should see the poll open on the screen now. If you could just choose whereabouts you sit on a scale of 1 to 10 in relation to your confidence level with T-level teaching and learning delivery. I'll leave that poll up just for a few seconds to allow everyone to have the opportunity to add their score. I'm going to close the poll shortly. If you could vote if you haven't already, that would be great. Okay, lovely, thanks for that. Generally, everybody's sitting around the 5 to 6 kind of halfway mark, which is where we'd expect you to be before the start of your program. So thanks again for that. Right, so moving on to an overview of the program. So what is a T Level? It's a level 3 two-year program aimed at 16 to 19-year-olds. They are equivalent in size, rigor and depth to 3 A-levels and attract UCAS points. They are vocationally focused on 11 occupational related routes and all share some common characteristics. T-levels are owned by the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, or IFATE, or the Institute. The design and content of the T-levels came from employer panels in the relevant industries. And because of these employer panels, T-levels offer a route to paid employment. UCAS points are also available for the completion of a T-level, so students can progress onto higher education or onto a higher level apprenticeship. This diagram shows the overall T-level program, and it consists of 5 key elements. NCFE are responsible for the assessment awarding of the technical qualification, or TQ. This includes the knowledge, understanding, skills and behaviours required in the industry. Each level 3 technical qualification must provide reliable evidence of students' attainment in relation to the core knowledge and skills relevant to the route and the occupational specialisms. They are covered in the technical qualification, which NCFE are responsible for. The subject content is set by T-level panels and approved and managed by the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Qualifications. The purpose of the Level 3 technical qualification is to ensure that students have the knowledge and skills needed to progress into skilled employment or higher level technical training relevant to that T-level. For the full T-level programme, the components shown along the bottom of the screen identify the additional competencies and requirements. It will be the responsibility of the centre and or the student to ensure that these requirements are met. And all T-levels have an industry placement in which students develop the technical skills and apply their knowledge. And there's a minimum of 315 hours for this. Maths and English requirements, students must achieve either a GCSE grade 4 or above, or a level 2 functional skills pass to complete this component. Some T-levels have other requirements set by the T-level panels, which are essential for skilled employment. For example, a licence to practice qualification or a professional registration. There is no such requirement at present for the education and childcare route, other than the EYE licence to practice, which we'll talk about later. So that's the TQ. Now let's look at the core components and assessments. So this first table provides an overview of the TQ assessment. The first row shows the core component, which is externally set and marked assessments. The grading for this is from A* to U. The second row shows the occupational specialism content and assessment, which I'll refer to as the OS from now on, and it's assessed via a range of tasks depending upon the specialism. As the course planning takes place, previous centres have focused teaching all of the core component in the first year and then moving on to the OS delivery and assessment in the second year. There are requirements for moderation for these with set dates, which we will run through later. And this second table shows the weightings for each of the core components assessments. This is taken directly from the qualification spec and it's there for your information. So let's look a little closer at how the core components are assessed. You'll see on the screen now how the TQ is divided into 12 elements. How the assessment is designed as follows. First of all, there's the external exams covering all the elements. Each exam lasts 2.5 hours and they are available in the summer and autumn terms in June and December. The students can resit the exams, but would need to resit both, and there are fees attached to the resits. They can also resit up to 2 years after completion of their programme. For the Employer Set Project, or ESP, these are contextualised tasks set by NCFE in conjunction and collaboration with employers. Again, there is the possibility of retakes for these two, and they are available in the same windows as the exams, normally in the months May and November. So just to confirm, the ESP is set and marked by NCFE, with some tasks having input from centre staff. It is best for the students to choose their occupational specialism context, but they can change specialisms between the end of year 1 and the starting of year 2. The conditions in which the ESP is completed are supervised, and the tasks are designed for the student to apply knowledge and skills to a real-world activity. Teachers must retain all the students' evidence and submit it to NCFE for marking. There are sample ESPs on Qhub, and it is recommended that students practice completing this type of activity, possibly using case studies or scenarios from their industry placement as the basis for them. We can also provide support and guidance for teachers to help them prepare their students for the ESP. To look at the ESP in more detail, I'll now run through a flowchart showing the different tasks and how they're managed. The 12-hour ESP project is made up of 4 distinct tasks, some of which contain multiple elements. The ESP starts with a student research-based activity that will be based on some pre-release project information. The student research should be focused on collating information and materials that they have received during their learning throughout the qualification, which can include any information pertinent to the contextualised version of the assessment, for example, the early years foundation stage. The pre-release material activity should be shared with students 3 weeks before the first supervised assessment session, which should only be scheduled to take place within the relevant assessment series window, and I will show you what these are later. So task 1A of the ESP requires the student to create an early support or intervention plan based on the pre-release information and project brief. Task 1B requires the student to produce an activity plan based on the plan produced for task 1A. The next task is based on a student discussion and peer review. For task 2A, students must not start this task until all of the students in the cohort have completed task 1. For task 2A part 1, the students are asked to review each other's activity plans produced in task 1B. For task 2A, part 2, the students then carry out a group discussion about their activity plans. And then for task 2B, the students will review the feedback they received in that discussion and make changes to improve their activity plan. This all must be completed under supervised conditions. For task 3A, students will use their early support plan and updated activity plan to prepare for a discussion with their tutor. In task 3B, the tutor should take the role of a workplace supervisor, for example, a key worker or teacher, and have the professional discussion about the approach the student took, exploring the rationale behind it. This role play type activity discussion also requires the tutor to assess the student's verbal communication skills and also complete a feedback form. And then finally, for task 4, the student will work under supervised conditions to reflect on the tasks and review their project work in relation to the project brief. We would suggest that students are told that there are a number of different tasks, but all based on their activity plan, reviewing and developing it. Templates are provided for all of these tasks, which makes practicing for them this assessment an option for you as your teachers. So moving on to the occupational specialism assessment, we do encourage you to focus on the core in the first year of delivery. So this is going to be more of a brief overview. But before we look at them, I'd like to find out which specialisms you'll be involved with. So I'm going to launch another poll, and I'm going to ask you to say which of the occupational specialisms you'll be delivering. So you should be able to see that on the screen now. I'll leave that open for a little while just so you can tell me which specialisms we should focus the rest of the session on. So thank you to those who voted already. If you could just keep your answers coming in, that would be brilliant. Okay, lovely, thank you. I'm going to close that now. So the majority of people don't know which one they're going to be delivering yet. It's to be confirmed. So thanks for that. We'll do a review of all of them. So the assignments of the occupational specialism are a series of tasks based on the specialist area. Think of these as being the opportunity for students to put the core knowledge learning into practice. There are specific conditions and timings for each of the tasks, and which we'll be able to focus on in the CPD sessions and your consultations. Formative assessment for the occupational specialism can take place at any time, and they are really seen as being good practice. Janet, I'm going to bring you in a little bit now, please, just to say something about the occupational specialist tasks, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so those 3 tasks that are sort of allocated to early years educator or to the assisting teaching pathway or indeed to the mentoring pathway down the line, as Helen has said, will all be graded past merit distinction or indeed ungraded. And I think what's important to note is that within the core, within that first year, there's been that absolute commitment to the breadth of education and childcare, looking at what's going on in development, in educational curricula and so on, and that's actually spanning from 0 to 19 years. And then you've got this deeper dive now into the occupational specialism, so into the actual pathway that the students are going to now focus and concentrate. And it's here that some really good anchoring to the core takes place. So the synoptic assignments per occupational specialism really do focus on things that are actually key to employment, key to the job in hand, key to practice, and they bring together that coherence of theory and practical application, and also benefit from the students' experiences in a real work environment. So in that first assignment, for example, we're looking at individual child or young person's need. So observation comes into here, planning comes into here, differentiation comes into here. And I'm thinking now across the board of all of each of those occupational specialisms, that's where there is a generic focus, whichever one you decide to be following. When we think about the second, so assignment 2, you're very much thinking about the practice. So that's that coherence of theory and practice coming together and very much concentrating on the skills. So it's in assignment 2 that you will find the EYE criteria, and it's also where you will find an approach to structured observations that are looking at specific skills that the student really needs and what is required to work effectively within that sector. And then in assignment 3, again, very much concerned with working collaboratively, with being able to identify next steps for young children, and also to be able to support young people in decision making and being informed so that the best practice and the best outcomes for individual children and young people is actually central to the practice. So again, bringing those things together. So as I say, you know, you will have time to think about the core and to think about how those occupational specialisms really do anchor to that, so that you've got the breadth and then very much that deeper dive where you're bringing together that coherence of theory and skill with the added benefit of the student's own work experience. Thanks, Helen.
Lovely, thank you. So these next tables you're going to see provide an overview of the assessment durations and timings across all the specialisms. I'll share the windows for these later in the webinar, as they do differ for each of the areas. So this page is for information only, and as I say, you're going to be thinking about these in year 2, not year 1. All assessments include coverage of the general competency framework. For example, the exams will have contextualised maths questions and have allocated marks in the written answers for the quality of the written communication. These competencies in English, Maths and IT should be developed whilst on the T Level programme, regardless of the T Level exit requirement already being met. Please talk to us about CPD for these areas if it would be helpful. Okay, so moving on to curriculum planning and final grading. For planning purposes, we'll firstly clarify the terms. Guided learning hours are when students are participating in education or training under the immediate guidance or supervision of their lecturer, tutor, supervisor, etc. This includes the activity of being assessed if taken place under the immediate guidance or supervision of a lecturer, supervisor, tutor, or other appropriate provider or education or training. And the total qualification time is the GLH for the qualification plus the work students would do outside of the classroom, such as home study, revision, etc. An estimated number of hours a student will likely spend in preparation, study, or any other form of participation in education or training, for example, home study. So as a guide, this first table shows the GLH and the TQT for the core components. You'll see that assessment is included in the TQT, but as the GLH are meant to be a guide and are not mandated, Centre may deliver the content in more or less hours. The second table shows the same for the early years educator specialism. And the third one is, the third one, yes, is for assisting teaching. We've also got the supporting and mentoring students. All information I've shared there has been taken directly from the qualification specification. And if you haven't seen them yet, I'll be showing you where to find them soon. So this table is going to provide an example curriculum plan. Having a comprehensive initial assessment and induction stage is going to be vital, as students may be starting their T-level course after many months out of learning, and their GCSEs being awarded as teacher assessed grades. Centres will need to ensure that the students will have all the skills required to start their T-level. We all know that GCSE grades do not always assure skills and knowledge, so please plan your induction activities in a way that fully assesses your students' starting points and, of course, potential. This will inform your student registration. We don't have the dates for this next academic year yet, but last year the deadline for the student registration was the 1st of November. Using the induction period to ensure students are enrolled on and registered on the most appropriate course is really vital. And in this example, the core content delivery also starts in September and runs throughout the year to April, so that all the core content has been delivered by around Easter. And then after Easter, prep for exams and the employer Sept project in earnest and revision can take place. So the assessments for the ESP will then take place in May, and then the exams in June. This would be the summer series of assessment for year one, with the results being published in August. Now for planning the industry placement. And in this example, year one starts in September. So I'm just going to get all of the content up. And pauses at Easter to allow the students to focus on the core assessments. The placement then has a further short time planned in the summer. And then the occupational specialism input could then start some delivery and directed remote learning tasks at the end of year one, then to be the focus of start of year two, along with the recommencement of the industry placement. The autumn series in November and December allows for resits of assessments if required, or you may plan to bypass the summer series and take longer to deliver the core, planning for the students to sit the first assessments here instead in the autumn window. The results of these are then published in March. The occupational specialism assessments would then take place between February and April of year two, and there's another opportunity for resits in the summer series of year two. And then the results for the exams and ASP are again in August. So what I'd like you to do is, looking at this example, please start to consider how you're going to structure your own curriculum. And if you've already started doing this, make a list of the interdependencies such as timetable, staff specialisms and availability of industry placements, and any other considerations you might need to include. Placements can take place on a day release basis or in blocks. This might be dictated by the placement employers, and so this will impact on how you will plan your curriculum too. Remembering that you're going to develop the students' English and maths skills throughout the programme. So moving on to grading. Each core component's marks will be combined to form the overall grade for the core component. The marks from the occupational specialism assignment will form the occupational specialism grade. So the first table here shows how the core and occupational specialisms are graded and awarded, and these grades will be submitted to the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, who will then issue the overall grade for the T level. This will be seen in the second table, and as you can see, the overall TQ grade has a stronger weighting for the occupational specialism than the core. An example for an aggregated grade would be a student being awarded a C grade for the core and a distinction for the occupational specialism. The table will then be used to award an overall grade of a distinction. And this next table shows how UCAS points are awarded using the T-level overall grade as the basis. There has been and continues to be much work carried out to promote T-levels to universities. Centres have been in contact with their local HEIs to reinforce these as a progression route. Please talk to your account exec if you would like more information related to your local area, but also how NCFE can help you with this if needed. I'll also quickly say here that the UCAS tariff points are only awarded if the full T level has been achieved. They also have to have the English and Maths requirement, have completed the industry placement hours and any other qualifications or registrations that are deemed vital for the area. Okay, we're now going to move on to Qhub and the key areas you're going to need for successful delivery of the T-level programme. I'll also take the opportunity to remind you to ask questions in the relevant box on the control panel here as I talk. I'm just going to quickly check if there's any questions while we're here, not as yet. So please remember, no questions are silly questions, so please pop them into the question box for us. So the website address you'll need can be seen on the screen now. This is the landing page for Qhub. If you click on the qualification section, it'll take you to a search site. And it's best to filter this to take you straight to the T-level section. You'll see that we've gone from 1,700 results to just 6 results because that's how many T-levels we currently offer. For education and training, if you scroll down here, you'll see the education and childcare qualification section at the very bottom. And then this is the home page for the technical qualification. The support materials and section and qual specs is going to be the most useful information for you to get you started. On here, you'll find a selection of support materials. These are fact sheets, sample exam papers, tutor guidance, ESP samples, and the templates. And if you haven't already looked here yet, it would be a very good place to start. It also has the qual spec at the top there. In the teaching materials section, you'll find some sample resources, the schemes of work, and essential and additional resources for both the core and occupational specialism components. Our Wave 1 centres have found these extremely useful as a starting point for their planning and delivery. There are a range of resources including PDFs, worksheets, e-learning modules, and session plans. Obviously, these would need to be adapted to meet the needs of your students. And as I said earlier, the most important document can be found here, which is the qualification spec. I'd recommend you always go to this document online as it is updated. So if you download and save it, always ensure that you're using the most recent version. Janice, is there anything you want to say about resources before I move on?
Okay, thanks, Helen. I think one of the things I will say, perhaps just for reassurance, if you're thinking about the T level now and you're thinking about preparation for the new academic term, is to consider what is available. There is an absolute wealth of information available to you. So there are some schemes of work that look at the core. They bring together elements that are, in a nice logical way. So out of the 12 elements that Helen has talked us through, it could be that you look at those 12 elements, you're thinking one academic year in preparation for synoptic assessment, Then thinking about, okay, are there any opportunities for holistic teaching? Where's the overlap and so on? So I would say take a look at what's available. Think about, you know, those different, the staff specialisms that you have within your team, the resources that are available to you, and how best to plan that over that academic term to make sure that those 12 elements are given the richness and the sort of attention that they need in that preparation. There's so much. There's e-learning modules, there's lots and lots of different things to be able to support the delivery. So I guess my greatest advice really would be to take a look at what's available to you. As Helen has said, the most critical document is the qualification specification. So take some time to really look at that and think about what these 12 elements are. Think about what resources are therefore available to support you with that. Think about your own staffing team and have open and honest conversations about any skills gaps that you may have within the team, and use time wisely to be able to make sure that A, are there resources available to support you with that, or B, what can we do? Can we get in touch with NCFE to guide us through those gaps? And you absolutely can. So I would say check out the resources. There is so much for you to sort of get your head around, but start with the specification. Don't be overwhelmed by that. Take it nice and methodical through the 12 elements. Nothing there that you wouldn't expect to be there in terms of elements and topics, but thinking about the detail and thinking about your own specialisms and your own sort of CPD needs, and then look at how the resources can support you with that. So in a nice, reassuring way, specification, skills gap analysis in the team, what resources are there to be able to help with that delivery. Thanks, Helen.
Lovely, thank you. And I will just also highlight, you can see on the screen now, there's a section underneath the teaching materials that says adaptations on that table on the left. The adaptations documents were produced to support our Wave 1 centres to allocate and devise the teacher assessed grades for year 1. One thing that the assessment development team have created are mini exams, which they call topic tests, and centres have said we wish we'd had those earlier. They'd be really useful to use for formative assessment of the core content. So if you're able to, get yourself onto Qhub and also look at that adaptation section to access the topic tests as well. Okay, the other important parts of the website include the exam timetable, which you'll find in the delivery and learner support section. If you click here, it'll take you to the subsections that you can see on the screen now. The external assessment timetable will take you to the most recent versions. And what that looks like is on this next slide. This is taken from the timetable you'll find in the section I've just showed you on the previous slide for the core components external examinations. You can see that the booking cut-off dates, the exam dates, and the times when the results will be published. It shows this for Autumn 21 and Summer 22 series for Education and Childcare. I would suggest your students should have all the core content delivered by the time the summer dates arrive, and there will be resit opportunities in the Autumn 22 and Summer 23 windows if required. We'll now have a look at the policies and documents section. All the policies, fees, regulations and forms you'll need are here. I'm going to leave that slide up. As I say, this is a screenshot of Qhub, and all the information you need will either be in the delivery learner support we've just been looking at, or the policies and documents section. In the assessment regulations section, you'll find the regulations document and the qualification specific instructions, or the QSID. Please refer to these two documents to ensure your centre is compliant. And also please ensure you refer to the most recent versions of these, as just like the qualification specification, they are updated and the versions that go onto the website are the most up to date, and they always have their dates on the front of them and their version numbers. So please ensure you're using the most up-to-date versions of all the guidance. And finally, for access arrangements, you would look in the forms section. For reasonable adjustments, please be aware that there are timescales, just as for any other qualification, which you can see in the table shown on the screen below. As I say, these are all in those documents, so those parts of the Qhub that I've shown you where they are. So the final section of today's webinar, relates to a summary of the support and review of any questions that we've been asked. Firstly, a reminder about the teaching and learning resources which have been produced. The core schemes of work provide a really good starting point, as Janet said, and centre feedback today focuses on their usefulness as a starting point for your curriculum planning and getting up to speed with the qualification spec and requirements. The essential resources are all free to centres, and there are also additional resources which can be purchased. And if you haven't already had a look, the textbooks are also now available from Qhub. So this table shows how the core elements have been grouped into the resource themes. You'll also see this table in the materials section of today's webinar for your information. If your centre plans to structure your delivery around the themes, it's also useful to see which theme covers which elements. So if you're looking for a specific resource, you can go straight to the theme in which the elements sit. As I said earlier, it's up to centres to choose how they plan their delivery and adapt and use the NCFE resources as they see best. Please talk to me in consultations about this if it would help, or put questions into the question box for us today. On the screen now is a reminder of the website addresses you'll find useful. The third link there takes you to the T Level specific page, and if you choose the page for education and childcare, which is on your screen now. And then if you look at where the arrow is, that's the education childcare section, it'll take you to the education and childcare specific page. There are a number of useful links here, some to the pages I've already shown you in today's webinar. If you've got any queries, please talk to us or talk to your account exec or one of the provider development team for advice. And then this slide shows the interactive PDF, which you'll have used to book onto our onboarding and all CPD sessions. The link to the booking page is also shown, as well as the link to our previous session recordings. The CPD activities we offered for Wave 1 centres in the first year of their T-level delivery. This document also takes you to the booking pages as well as the links to the previous Wave 2 sessions. All our CPD is bespoke to the T-level subject areas. So as you can see highlighted by the arrow now, for education and childcare, you would choose that subject area. We do offer and we have planned, everything we have planned will be found on here, but we do ask for staff input on what we deliver. So please also share any ideas you have for CPD with us. You can see that bottom row shows education and training, webinars, also digital delivery and health and science. So you would choose the session that's most appropriate to yourself. Qhub have produced a mapping document to current and other Qhub textbooks for education and childcare, which will allow staff to see where the similarities are to the other existing programmes. They've also produced knowledge organisers, which many of our Wave 1 centres found really useful. And these will help you to source additional information to help underpinning student knowledge. Qhub have also now released education and childcare T-level textbooks, one for each of the EYE and then the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education website has very useful information, including news, updates for students, employers, and of course, providers yourself. So this next slide provides information regarding the key contacts for your T-level journey. The customer support team are there as your first line of enquiry. I'm your contact for support related to teaching and learning and CPD sessions. Oh, sorry, you've got David's information up there, so I'll change that to mine. And then the account manager support centres with the business of delivering the T-levels. Okay, I'd like to ask my final poll question. After attending the session, now what is your confidence level in relation to being ready for setting up and running a T level? In education and childcare, of course. I'm just going to launch the poll. It's exactly the same numbering system as earlier, 1 being low, 10 being high. Please rate yourself where you are now while I quickly look at the questions section. Okay, thanks. I'm going to close that poll now. So thank you for participating there. Everyone's score's gone right up. We're up to 7, 8s and 9s and 10s now. So thank you so much. We're going to look specifically at question and answers now. So I'll have a quick look at the questions. I know we've had one come in about the occupational specialism. Janet, this is probably one for yourself. Can or should centres be starting the observations or the assessment of the occupational specialism at all in year 1?
Okay, a really good question. So thank you for that one. When we think about early years and assisting teaching, I think it's, and of course mentoring in educational settings, what is really critical to developing the skills and you know, really appreciating the knowledge and understanding is that students can get it out into their real work experiences as soon as it is safe and possible to do so. I think what's important to recognise and appreciate is the significance of the early years educator criteria that implies that students must complete 750 placement hours, whereas the other two pathways, so the assisting teaching and the mentoring, is looking at 315. So there's a big difference. So really important that we just make that point, that if students are doing an early years educator occupational specialism, that you really want to be starting those placements as soon as it is safe and possible to do so. And the reason for that is to be able to manage those 750 hours over the 2-year programme. So thinking about the timetable there. With early years, just sticking with that occupational specialism for a moment, you will have 2 parts to the skills base of assignment 2. And that is because of the early years educator criteria that Helen mentioned right at the beginning that are integral to be able to work at level 3 in an early years setting within those ratios for the early years foundation stage, the statutory framework. So absolutely, when you're looking at early years as the chosen occupational specialism, and you know that that's going to be what the students are going to be working towards, students need to be getting into their placements as soon as they can. Observations can begin for assignment 2, part 1, right from that right from the very beginning, because this is that familiarity of making sure students are competent and they're reaching those early years educator criteria. So think about looking at assignment 2, part 1 for the early years, and the assessor from the centre, in line with our requirements for moderation, will follow that competency-based framework for assignment 2, part 1. When it comes to part 2 of the early years assignment for assessment 2 in the occupational specialism, and indeed assignment 2 in its entirety for assisting teaching and mentoring, then you have some structured observations that are graded past merit distinction. Absolutely, they're going to be assessed following that moderation process. So when the grades are actually going to be allocated, that's when you want to get the maximum from your students. But absolutely, that practice makes perfect, doesn't it? So yes, absolutely, those practice observations can begin supporting the student and giving them as much experience as they can so that they get the best possible outcome from those structured observations. So have a look, when it comes to the skills and it comes to the practice, have a look at assignment 2. In the early years, split over part 1 and part 2. In assisting teaching, you have just got the structured observations. So the grading will come later, but think about what the student's journey is actually going to look and feel like, and then you can actually be prepared preparing those students in the most effective way possible. Thanks, Helen.
Lovely, thank you for that, Janet. The next question is something that I'm going to do now, and it's just to show where the topic tests are. So I'm just going to pull over the screen that shows the Education Childcare T Level page. If you see this section here where you've got the support materials, qual spec and adaptations, I'm going to click on adaptations. It takes you down to the bottom where I showed you earlier, the different topic tests are just here, as you can see. They're all available to download now, and each topic test has their own mark scheme as well. So you could get your students to do the topic tests, but then mark each other's or mark their own, and therefore have more of awareness of where their skills gaps are or knowledge gaps are. But even more importantly, they could have a go at some of these topic tests, but then write their own topic tests for different elements. And the Wave 1 providers said that they found these topic tests really useful, and there's lots of information here about how you can break down the content into smaller tests. So they are just in the adaptations section, and you can see them all. Is that there's a mountain of documents, and it tells you which element is assessed in which test. Janet, did you have anything you wanted to say about the topic tests at all?
I think just to add really to what you said there, Helen, in terms of students will be looking at synoptic assessments in the core. So very much formative assessment is very much really central to preparation. So the topic test can help with that. There's other things that can help with that, and you know, the mock papers for part one, you know, paper A and paper B, and looking at the employer set project and really taking time to understand that and what the student is expected to do. So being mindful of formative learning, and that goes on quite incidentally in the teaching and learning environment through Q&A, through group work and so on. But what the topic test can really do, and looking through sample papers and peer evaluations and so on, is really put a little bit of structure to that, so that you know you feel in control of that preparation a little bit more, because it's the synoptic assessment that's really going to test it. That's going to be the grade. So it'll give you an absolute clue into what's actually being absorbed in that teaching and learning environment. Thanks, Helen.
Lovely, thanks, Janet. So I'm just going to go back to the top of the page just so people can see exactly where I am at the moment. So in Qhub, in the qualification for education and childcare T level, in the same section you'd find the support materials with the qual spec, the fact sheets, core exams, tutor guidance, example papers and example mark schemes for ESP, occupational specialisms. As you can see, it does go on and on and on with support and mentoring as well. And there are also some standard exemplification materials which you might find useful. So where the assessment team have designed a pass and distinction example of the assessment. So lots of information here that you're going to find extremely useful. Though that's under the support materials, and the teaching materials, as we said earlier, or the actual samples, the schemes of work. The SCORM and non-SCORM compliant, that's to do with how your centre actually stores them. And for they're not for use for not for use on learner management systems. So depending on which system you use in your centre would depend on which one you got, but the resources and content team could help you do that, and they'll sort all that out with you. So you just ask for input and guidance and demos from there. And as you can see, there are essential core resources, so on and so forth, and it just goes on and on and on and on. But we recommend using them and adapting them. And then just to clarify, just to confirm, those topic tests you'll find in the adaptations section, along with some additional samples and all of the different elements, topic tests and their mark schemes. Okay, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now. Just see if we have any more questions coming in. Janet, is there anything that you think is pertinent or useful to? No problem at all. I've just said thank you for the showing of the TOMA test. Anything at all else you'd like to share or highlight that I haven't said?
I think you've given a really good coverage, Helen. I think what I would say is that when you're looking at that qualification specification, remember those 12 elements that make up the core are broad. There is a real significant breadth in that is purposeful. So don't be surprised by the amount of information that belongs and lives with each of those elements. And then make good use of the materials and the resources that are available to you. Think about any sort of CPD that you yourself might have. Think about the occupational specialisms. There's lots of guidance available to look at how that breadth in the core will actually support that deeper dive into that specialism. Lots of resources available. Step one, try and get your head around the actual components of the specification and the expectations of this qualification, and then going back and putting in the building blocks that will actually give you the confidence to be able to deliver this qualification in an effective and efficient manner. I suppose I would add as well, Helen, that those people, those individuals, the staff, the experts that are actually delivering these qualifications, it's always difficult when starting something new, especially when you're looking at this linear approach, and to actually just take some reassurance from the fact that this is education and childcare. You've been involved in teaching education and childcare. You know what level 3 looks and feels like. This is a new specification. It's going to be okay. So I'd like to end on that reassuring note.
Yeah, could you also do me a favour and share just some of the areas that centres have already asked for CPD or support with, the specialist areas that centres are asking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of when we think about the skills gap analysis and just thinking about what might be the trickier areas to teach, you know, then there's been questions around the theoretical approaches, the different pedagogies and so on, where people are used to teaching from an early years bias, those that are used to teaching from a children and young people bias, so the assisting teaching. Now that that's being merged, so there's been sort of resources made available to look at the different theories that are included in that core specification, and at the sort of level, so to give an idea of the depth. So pedagogies where there is information around statutory framework, so what's going on in the early years foundation stage, what are the requirements of that, what's happening in 2021 with the new EYFS reform, what's happening in the national curriculum if you're not used to teaching that, and the subject areas and so on. And then there's a host of different theorists and theoretical approaches, and also philosophical approaches to learning. There are resources to be able to help you with that, so that you're not spending time sort of searching for this and doing your own research, which is absolutely important. But there are things there to help you and to guide you and to give you sort of an understanding of the depth and the coverage. And of course now with the textbooks made available, that also helps in terms of that levelling. And you know, we get a lot of questions around, well how much information is sufficient, and to what depth should this subject or this particular element or part of this particular element be taught. So the textbook will help, the resources will help, but just again, you know, you're the experts in your field. Level 3 is level 3, and the breadth is, you know, just don't be overwhelmed by that breadth. Take some time to look at that, to think about that, and to match it to the resources. But the questions really, Helen, and queries have been from people who are teaching early years, who now are sort of widening that across those core elements, and vice versa from people who are used to teaching an older or preparing students to work with older children. So that's where we've been busy looking at that, and the theories, pedagogies to effective teaching and learning within those two different ranges, as well as philosophical underpinning influences, if you like, to educational curricula.
Lovely, thanks Janet. And we do have another question that's come in, and it's regarding the placements. Are students expected to have experience from birth to 7 years? What kind of age range are the expectations?
Okay, so thinking of that sounds like it's come from an early years because of that sort of EYE criteria. So thinking about the EYE criteria, you're really, for best practice, you're thinking about the knowledge of 0 to 7, but the placement opportunities really in that 0 to 5 age range. We would always say it's good practice, it's best practice if students can have some direct experience working across those age ranges. However, we also recognise the complexities of that. So best practice, absolutely, the breadth of the 0 to 5, but we do appreciate the complexities. And so if you have any individual concerns around how you're going to meet or not the early years educator criteria, then please do get in touch, because we're appreciative of the fact that it's not always possible to work across those age ranges, and that's why, you know, we're able to use things like professional discussion so we can think about differentiation and so on. But for best practice, thinking about those age ranges, we all know when you're working with children, working with baby children, and indeed young people, having that direct sort of experience is the best practice ever.
Lovely, thank you for that, Janet. And I've got another question for you. I'm not going to apologise.
Okay.
As far as progression routes go, have you had much to do with the universities and T levels?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, obviously, anything new goes through process, could take time, but we're having some absolutely positive responses, some really engaging conversations with universities. So I would like to say, and I will say it, that universities are being very positive about their approach to T levels. We're working hard with individual universities to make sure that, you know, from November this year, students that are on the first sort of pilot phase of the T level in education and childcare will be putting forward their personal statements. They will be applying for universities. So we need universities to recognise the T level, and this work is going on and going from strength to strength. We've also got a careers toolkit where we've got lots of information there for students, for parents, for staff, from career staff right through to teaching and delivery. Lots of things there about HPI engagement, but also there's things on there such as you know, men in childcare, for example, as a theme. We've got some interviews and case studies with students that have gone through the types of degrees and so on, or just an employment journey and so on. Lots of things on there. And we also have a dedicated HEI stakeholder engagement department as well. So yes, there's lots going on from the Institute and from us to be able to make sure that that transition and that journey really does value what the students are doing and is appreciative of the hard work that's involved in a T level.
Lovely, thanks for that, Janet. It's always good to have your subject specific and a specialist view on all of those. Okay, so all we have left to say now is thank you so much for attending and participating in the session today. There will be an evaluation form for you to complete as you log out, and your feedback and ideas really do help us to develop our CPD offer. I've also included the links to the T level support pages and some of the websites we've mentioned during today's webinar, and I've also put my email address on the bottom there. All we've got left to say is goodbye and thank you from everyone at NCFE Cash. We're not quite going yet, so if any other questions come in, we're here for them. Please stay safe, and we do look forward to working with you further again. Thank you. Thanks, Janet.
Thank you. Thanks, Helen.
So as I say, we'll just stay on a little while longer in case you have any more questions that come in. And if you don't have any more questions, please feel free to go and plan your wonderful T-level programme.